Daf Chof Zayin Amud Beis will begin Daf Chof Zayin Amud Aleph, the second wide line at the two dots. Zokta Gemara Bishla Gabi Gecholim Divra Kol Abbas Muteras. We learned before that there's a machlokes Rebbe and Chachamim if a person fired up an oven with Iser Hano. Do we say, in such a case, do we say that the pas is asura or is it muteras? Do we say yesh v'cheitzim b'pas, that the isra hano is part and parcel of the pas, and therefore the pas is asur, becomes asur b'hano? Or do we say no, yesh v'cheitzim b'pas, the chum say yesh v'cheitzim b'pas, and the pas is muteras, and it's muter. But everyone agrees that if already the wood has been reduced to coals, then the pas muteras, because the basic din by the Isra Hano of Orla and Kilaya Kerem, which are also b'hano, once it's been reduced to ashes, then it's no longer also b'hano. So therefore, if the baking takes place when already the wood is burned, or the twigs, the klipim are burnt, then it's no longer Isra Hano. So therefore, there's no Isra Hano to be in the pas, to say yesh v'cheitzim b'pas, to make the pas asura. Now we have a machlokes at Gemara, at what stage do we say that it's muter? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Chia Barashi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chad Amar Lo Yishan El Gecholim Oimos. Where do we say that it's muter? That's only when the coals are smoldering, meaning when you don't have a flickering flame, the flame has already died down, then it's muter. That's considered to be in the stage where it's ashes, and there's no Isra Hano, and then it's muter. But if the coals are flickering, so you still have part of the flame, then it's also according to Rebbe. Rebbe would not be made in such a case. Meaning, Rebbe says is that you're getting Hano from the eights. You're getting Hano from it not after it's already been consumed. He says you're getting it as it's being consumed, and therefore if it's smoldering, it's still considered to be Hano from the eights, not from the ash. And the other one says, no, that even when it's flickering, it's all muter. It's muter as well, because he says that it's still considered to be that the wood is burnt, the orla kilakam is burnt, and you're only getting hano from the coals. So Bishlam Lamand Amar Shois Asurim Mishum Diesh V'Cheitzim B'Pas. So we understand that the one that says Loichashos is also because there's a flame and you're getting hano from it, and Yesh V'Cheitzim B'Pas. And Lamand Amar Afil Loichashos Mutara is, but according to the Lamand Amar, who says no, it's even mutter when it's flickering. Pas to Aser the Yesh V'Cheitzim B'Pas. Rabbi Hechem Mishkachas Lo. What's the case where Rabbi does Aser, where he says that Yesh V'Cheitzim B'Pas? It's talking where there's a flame from your baking opposite the flame, meaning that the wood is burning. It's a flame. It hasn't been reduced to coals at all. So over there, Rebbe says you're getting hano from the wood. So therefore the pas is asura. So, Frank the Gemara, Mechlal, the Rabbanon, the Plige, Aleh, Shori, Afila, Kashavuka, Kenegdai, means to say the Rabbanon that say that the pas is muteres. So, they mean to say even when it's Avuka, Kenegdai, they still say, even in such a case, you're not considered to be getting hana from the wood, you're only getting hana from the heat after the wood is consumed. So if that's the case, what is the case of Eitzim that's also according to the Rabbanon? What is the case of the Isser Hano? Ravami Bar Chama, he answers, B'shashifa, a footstool. You didn't burn it at all. It wasn't used as fuel. You made furniture out of it. You made a footstool out of it. So then the wood is present, so it's also B'hano. Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. So Rami Bar Chama had the following shayla from Chisda: Toner she'asika ba'atzei hektish afabayas apas. If the oven was heated up, fired up with wood of hektish, which is of course also b'hano. Va'afabayas apas l'Rabbanan d'shari b'kamaisa, according to the Rabbanan, who said by or levikilai kerem, that's also b'hano. Nevertheless, the pas is muteres in shvacheitzim b'pas. So there, the shari b'kamaisa mai. What would they say about this case where the oven was fired with atzei hektish? Now, Mashal explains that really me'ikir din lafida maskana the Gemara, it's not a shaila, because the only basis of the heter by oral klai kerem is because once it's turned into ash, it's no longer asur b'hana. But as we'll see by hektish, that's not the case, that it is asur. So therefore, it's not a shaila. But according to the hanacha right now, according to the current hanacha, that by hektish it's no different than oral klai kerem in that regard, that once it's returned to ash, it's mutter. What would be the shaila? What would be the din rather by hektish? You said it's also. What's the difference between this and orla? By orla they say it's mutter. Why did they say here it's also? How can you compare the two? Orla b'teila b'masayim. By orla, if it has 200 parts of heter, keneged the orla, it's mevatel. It comes bottle and it's mutter. Hektish afilu b'alaf loy bottle. But hektish is not bottle even in 1,000. So therefore, it's more chomer. So just because orla and klai kerem is mutter, but by hektish it's more chomer, and it's also. Taisus asks the kasha. He says by hektish, it's be'etzem. It's the same as everything else. It's not bottle even ba'alaf because it's a dover sheyesh l'matirim. You can be pointed. It can be make mutter. Now the klal is dover sheyesh l'matirim. Then it's a filo ba'alaf loy bottle. So anything else, other Yisrael also, if it's a dover sheyesh l'matirim, it's not bottle. So really, ba'atzem, it's not a chumrah in hektish. It's just that the din of dover sheyesh l'matirim applies in the case of hektish. If it would apply in other cases, the din would be the same. However, the Gemara says you can't compare it. So to orla. My kasha is the following. Why should you say it's also v'halomal amesik? The one who fired the oven with it is mal. He's over me'ila. Person takes personal benefit from something of hektish, he's moil, which means he has to pay karen v'chaimish and to bring a korban asham. But the consequence of that is that the item that was hektish now is yaitzel l'chulin, it becomes chulin, becomes mutter. So it's chulin. So therefore, since he's moil in this atzei hektish, it becomes mutter, it's chulin, and it's mutter ba'anos. So why should you say the bread is also talk about shlomo? We're not talking about atzem bedek bias. We're talking about wood that where a person was makdish to use to be able to purchase from that wood, to purchase the shlomim. V'alibed Rabbi Yehuda, the Omer that's going according to Rabbi Yehuda says, hektish b'shoigeg mischalel b'mezer ein mischal. That hektish, if he's moil b'hektish and b'shoigeg, then it's mischal, it's yaitzel chulin. B'mezer ein mischal. But if he's moil b'mezer intentionally, it does not become chulin. B'mezid, my time aloi. Why do we say mezid? It doesn't go to chulin kim de la bar me'ilah, because the parsha of me'ilah, the Torah says in the parsha me'ilah, if a person does a bishgaga, he does a bishgaga. So the din of me'ilah per se, of the din of karen v'chaimish v'asham and yaitzel l'chulin is b'shoig. Now Isra no applies whether it's shoig or mezid. Mezid is also asparno, but this particular din of me'ilah, where we say it's yaitzel l'chulin, Rabbi Yehuda says is only b'shoig, not b'mezid. So came the la bar me'ilah nafka l'chulin. So shlomim nami. So here also, if the wood is to be used for shlomim, by shlomim also there's no din of me'ilah. Came the la bar me'ilah ninhu. Shlomim also there's no me'ilah, because by me'ilah it has to be something which is kodshe Hashem, which is exclusively for hektish, for Hashem. Now shlomim, the majority of the shlomim, the baalim eat the meat. It's only the emurim that go on the mizbeach. Now in Echanami, after the avodah and their emurim have been separated, and they go on the mizbeach, on the emurim themselves, that is kodshe Hashem. And so la'achar zrikas adam in Chanami, there is me'ilah on the emurim. But prior to the zrikas adam, it's not exclusively kodshe Hashem. So there's no me'ilah on the shlomim yet. So therefore came the la bar me'ilah ninuloi nafka l'chulin. It doesn't have the specific din of me'ilah, and therefore it's not yaitzel l'chulin. So therefore, we say over here, it's does not yoytze l'chulin. We're talking about the wood that's used for shlomim, and therefore, even though he is getting hano from it, it's not yoytze l'chulin, and therefore it remains also b'hano. And therefore he said, if you use it to fire up the oven and you bake bread in it, it's also even according to the Rabbanan. Is that true? Whenever you say that when the person who fires the oven with it is over me'ila, it's yoytze l'chulin, is that then true? We learned in the Brisa, kol hanisrafim from mut. Everything that must be burned, isura hano, that must be burned, the ashes are mutba'ano. Because once it's nasis mitzvah, then the mitzvah that's supposed to be done, that's supposed to be performed with it, was done already. The ashes are mutter. Chutz me'atzei ashera, except the wood from an ashera tree, which is a vedazor, which is also ba'ano. There, even if when it's burned, the ashes are also. And the ashes of hekdesh are la'olam aser. They're always aser. That by avodah zarah it's lo yidbak b'chabiyadcha uma min acherem, and therefore even the ashes is aser. And hekdesh also, as we'll learn out, that for hekdesh is aser. Why is it used by hekdesh loshan la'olam aser, as Rashi and Tamura speaks out? Because the avodah zarah is not necessarily always aser, because if the avodah zarah is mevatel, it has bittul on it, he nullifies it, then becomes mutar. By hekdesh is la'olam aser. So therefore we see over here that the ashes are aser, even so by hekdesh it's loylam aser. So you're telling me whether it's mi'ila, it's yoytze l'chulin. We see here that the ashes are always aser. It says that what we're talking over here is that there was no moil. There's no one who was over mi'ila. The fire, it burnt on its own. The fire broke out. It broke out on its own. The fire broke out, and it got burnt. So there's no person here who was moil to say, therefore, that it becomes chulin. So in such a case, that's why the ashes remain aser. And Tosfos says, we could have said simply that we're talking over here by atzei of shlomim, which there's no milah, and therefore it's not yoytze b'chulin, but nevertheless, Gemara gives this case of nafal d'leika me'aleha, which does not restrict it to the case of davka of shlomim. In a similar vein, previously when the Gemara says we're talking about, when we're saying that it's loy nafka lechulin, when it doesn't go lechulin, that it's talking about shlomim, it could have said that we're talking according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Mezid, but it's not the normal way to talk about Mezid. That's why previously the Gemara says that it's talking about shlomim, that is not yoytze lechulin. Here the Gemara does not mention the case of shlomim. It mentions that nafka d'leika me'aleha, where there was no person to be moyel, there's no one to be moyel, so it's not yoytze lechulin. Rav Shmaya Omer, he gives another teretz, where do we say that the ashes of hekdesh are also, it's dafka where there's still a mitzvah remaining to be done with them. That there's a mitzvah that's remained to be done with them, that they have to be Tunur Geniza, meaning the Trumas Hadeshin, the ashes of Trumas Hadeshin, which have to be put away. Desanya V'soma Benachas. It says regarding the Trumas Hadeshin, regarding the ashes, V'soma. It says, therefore we learn out, it has to be done gently. As the Ravid explains, it doesn't say where the Torah says in other places that V'hishlich, he throws it. V'soma. So it has to be placed gently. V'soma kulai. He said place it. So it should be all in one pile. It shouldn't be in different piles. It should be in one pile. All of it should be in one pile. V'soma shalei fazer. And v'soma shalei fazer, it should be placed and not scattered about. So it's from the fact that you see that it has to be placed next to the Mizbeach, you see that it has to remain there. And it's therefore ton geniza. It's also bahano. So that's specifically regarding the Trumas Hadeshin, according to this Mandomer. The Gemara continues. The next part of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ein biur, that he says ein biur chometz el sreifa. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ein biur chometz el sreifa. It has to be done specifically by burning. Now, as we learned previously, that's only shaloi b'shas biur. Shas Biura, he's minded that it can be done in any way. But the Shas Shalei B'Shas Biura, it has to be done specifically through Sreifa. V'adin Naisen, how do we know this? We learn from a Kal V'chaimer. Uma Naiser She'ena B'Val Yira B'Val Yim Naiser, if the korban is left over until morning, it has to be burnt. Now, there's no Isser B'Val Yira B'Val Yim There's no Isser that it can't be in your possession, and nevertheless it has to be burnt. So man noiser she'ena b'al yimotze ton sreifa chometz sheyeshen b'al yiro b'al yimotze, then chometz, which is more chomer, that there is an iser b'al yiro b'al yimotze l'kol sheken sheton sreifa, certainly it has to be burnt. Amru loy, they said to him, kol din shetadan tchilas lahach b'seifa lahakel ein adin. If you make a kal v'chaimer that's tchilasa lahachmer and seifa lahakel, it's not a kal v'chaimer. If you want to make a kal v'chaimer that to learn out and apply a chumrah, but if it will ultimately rely or could rely in a kula, you can't make such a kal v'chaimer. So if it's called din shatadan tchilas alachim b'seifel ha'kaleinu din. Lo imatzei in a scenario where a person doesn't have firewood, he doesn't have the means to burn it. Yeah, Yoshev a bottle, according to you, that it has to be done dafka through Sreifa, then he'll be Yoshev a bottle. He won't have to do anything. And the simple meaning of the Torah when it says tashbisu, that you should eliminate the sower, is bechol davar sh'atayachal in any way that you can. Now you're making this kal v'chaimer to therefore impose a din of dafka through Sreifa, but it could come out through that a kula. And therefore, you can't learn it in such a way with a kal v'chaimer. That's not a proper kal v'chaimer. So therefore, Rav Yehuda applies another means of learning this out, another source of learning it out. The Ram Chalva says that Rav Yehuda l'shitos, however, he holds that in a chanami you could learn such a kal v'chaimer. So it's not a kash on Rav Yehuda l'shitosai. But according to the sheet of the Chachamim that said you can't learn a kal v'chaimer in this manner, so therefore he proposes a different limud. So what's the limud that he makes? He says, Chazer Rabbi Yehuda v'dona din hachar. So Rabbi Yehuda now has a different makor. Noiser aser ba'achila. Noiser is aser ba'achila. V'chometz aser ba'achila. And chometz is aser ba'achila. So we can learn out one from the other. Rashi says that it's through Gzera Shava, but what it means is, it's loidak, what it means is with a memetzi. We find with Neiser that it's also ba'achila, and Chometz is also ba'achila. And Chometz is similarly also ba'achila. Ma Neiser b'sreifa, just like by Neiser, what's left over has to be burnt. Chometz b'sreifa, it has to be burnt. Amruloi, they said, how can you compare them? Nevela techiach. We'll show you not that way from the din of nevela. Shasur ba'achila, it's also ba'achila v'eina tuna sreifa, and it does not have to be burnt. So you see that just because it's also ba'achila doesn't mean it has to be burnt. Amruloi and hefresh, but there's a difference between them. You can't compare it to nevela. Neiser also b'achila b'hana. Neiser is also not only b'achila, it's also b'hana. V'chometz also b'achila b'hana. It's also b'achila b'hana. Ma neiser ton sreifa, av chometz ton sreifa. So they both have to therefore be burnt, just like neiser has to be burnt, chometz has to be burnt. But ma she'enkein nevela, it's muter b'hana. So it's not a kasha that it doesn't have to be burnt. Amruloi, they said to him, Shor haniskul yechiach, a shore that has to have skila, that has to be stoned, a shore that killed a person has to be stoned. And that's yechiach, also ba'achila b'hana, it's also both ba'achila b'hana, ve'eno tanas sreifa, and it's not tanas sreifa, it doesn't have to be burned. Amr lehem, Rav Yehuda says, hefresh, there's a difference. Neiser also ba'achila b'hana, vanish chorus. That Neiser is not only also b'achila, not only also b'hana, but also the punishment for it is chorus. The chometz also b'achila b'hana v'anish chorus, and similarly by chometz it's anish chorus. It's not only achila, it's hana, and there's chorus. So therefore, ma Neiser b'sreifa, av chometz b'sreifa. So just like Neiser has to be burnt, so too chometz. And so don't ask me a kasha on shor and niskol where there's no chorus. So Amaloi, they said to him, Chelba shel shor nisko yachiach. What about the chel of a shor nisko? That's yachiach. She also b'achila. Ubahana. That chel is also b'achila. It's also b'hana because it's a shor nisko. Va'onish kores, and it's onish, the punishment is kores for eating it, like any chelev where the punishment is kores. Ve'naton streif, and it doesn't have to be burnt. Now, it's also b'hana, but it doesn't have to be burnt. It has to be buried, but not burnt. So therefore, it's asir kasher, just because something is onish, something is also b'achil b'hana, and onish kores doesn't necessarily mean it has to be burnt. So we'll see in the next Homad what Rav Yehuda, what further limud he makes.